All right, welcome everyone to the Higher Education and Accessibility Tableau user group. We are thrilled that you could join us today and tomorrow being, what was it again, Roshni?
Global Accessibility Awareness Day. So yeah, it's going to be an amazing day.
Yes, yes, it is. And we're so excited that we have Mark and Ben joining us today to teach us about accessibility and how we can incorporate it into our dashboards more. We've got a packed agenda for you, starting with our welcome and announcements. Then Mark Miller from Inclusion, Impact, Accessibility is going to introduce us to Title II and more. And then he'll be followed by Ben Snider from the University of Illinois, teaching us tips and tricks for increasing your Tableau dashboard accessibility, followed by our wrap up and chat. But before we get into that, does anyone have announcements they want to share with the group? You can come off mute, you can put it in the chat. If you have any sort of events or any job announcements you want to share, please feel free. I don't hear any announcements from the group, so we'll share a few announcements with you. This is going to be the last call for Analytics Day registration. So Analytics Day is on June 11th. You have to register by May 28th. That is only 8 days away. So make sure that you get in there and do it. It is a free 1 day mini conference featuring Tableau for higher education. And it's just a bunch of like 20-minute segments for the most part, plus, a guest speaker and the Ultimate Viz Showdown, which we'll get to on the next slide. But you can come and go throughout the day as you please, whatever works for your schedule. And anyone who registers will have access to the recordings after it's over. So just go and register. You have 8 more days. And did I mention we have guest speaker Andy Kriebel coming all the way from, not coming, but virtually coming all the way from across the ocean to talk to us about, well, I'm actually not going to ruin the surprise for you. I'll wait till the whole agenda is posted. But he's got a fabulous presentation planned for you. And then we're also going to have the Ultimate Viz Showdown, Tableau versus Power BI rematch. Which one will make the cut? You be the judge. It's going to feature a student success dashboard this year. So lots of fun stuff to see there. And that's all for Analytics Day. I will turn it over to Sam to give you a recap on Tableau Conference.
Yes, so in case you missed it, there were so many great moments at the conference, both in person and virtually. Thank you to Ginny for hosting those watch parties. And there were some great sessions recorded and available on Salesforce Plus, which James will cover in a few slides. But the first session I want to talk about is the education meetup. So this was scheduled as the last day of the conference at 8 a.m. right after data night out, and we still had over 170 people attend, which I'm not allowed, I don't know if I'm allowed to say where we ranked in terms of the in terms of the meetups, but we were very high up. So thank you so much to everybody who was able to attend, and hopefully you enjoyed the bingo and the raffling and all of that. And yeah, David in the chat said it rhymes with new. So there we go. And thank you to the other TUG leaders and everybody who was able to help co-host. If you weren't able to attend, then hopefully you were able to make it next year. And hopefully we'll have some more fun games and prizes. And then the next session that I wanted to really highlight, and the best part of the conference for me personally, was the education hands-on training session. So if this is the first time you're hearing about this, then this was actually the very first industry-specific hands-on training that's ever been offered at a Tableau conference, which is a pretty big deal, right? And these hands-on training sessions are historically known to use the Superstore data set, which is very often irrelevant to us in education. A lot of the examples just do not translate over well. So instead, they used a brand new Superschool data set, which was created in partnership with Salesforce and other education TUG leaders. So thank you so much to Harold Thomas, Dan Bradley, Umberto Panafleck, Jeremy Weatherall, and all the other TUG leaders that helped bring this data set to life. Eventually, the data set will be available for you all to use and will also become super district and to include K-12 data so that we can see that pipeline. And just kind of me guesstimating and counting people who were in the room, it was about 170 people who attended this as well. I don't know if it's the same who attended the education meetup, but that is a huge number. So thank you to those of you who were able to attend both or either session. Numbers like this is, yeah, right. Apparently, we really like 170. But numbers like these really do help us convince Salesforce and Tableau that education specific material and events are necessary and we will show up, right? And so, as much as we all love data informed decisions, the data here clearly points to education. So, yeah, thank you again, everybody. And then now I will pass it over to James to talk about another great session at the conference.
Did you see the Iron Viz this year? It was incredible. Now, I had the best seat I've ever had at one of the competitions. I was second row, right behind the Tableau executives. But you can get an even better view by watching it on demand at either Salesforce Plus or on YouTube. Now, the 2026 Iron Viz competition uses data from Goodreads, which means if, like me, you are a Goodreads user, you are represented in this data. So Ann Prager came out on top with the genre mashup madness dashboard, which included some of her own hand-drawn art. So after watching or rewatching the competition, head over to Public to check out all the entries. But for now, we'll go ahead and give you a single image preview of the different ones. So we have, I said, and to reduce the number of genres to, I think, 17, and then examine different combinations and offer some predictions on what the next big mashup will be. Brian examines why modern books tend to be rated higher than the classics, and he did this all on one sheet. And then Kevin shows us that graphic novels consist of more than just superheroes, and they're not just for kids. Now, in addition to Iron Viz, you can also watch some of the other TC sessions on Salesforce Plus. So besides the big ones, these are some of the education community sessions that should be available on Salesforce Plus. And if you see a session or know of a session that is not available on Salesforce Plus, let us know, because many of the sessions are also being delivered to user groups. And so if we know who you want to see, we can reach out to them and hopefully they can come and present at HETUG. And finally, TC27 will be returning to San Diego. Now, dates are not available yet, but expect it to be somewhere in kind of mid-April to mid-May, which is where it has been for I think, the last 3 years. And so now, Roshan's going to tell us some things that came out of TC.
There were some really cool accessibility improvements and sessions at Tableau conference. So first off, Devs on Stage was amazing because there was this tiny little bit of data devs on stage where TC Hackathon finalists were kind of off stage a little bit, but they were highlighted. And the winning TC Hackathon entry was by Tristan Guven. I'm messing up his name. Tristan, Data Dev Tristan behind La Data Viz. His product was called Visual, and it includes a bunch of accessibility features. So there's some automatically generated alt text using AI. There's dashboard descriptions and other content, again, automatically generated. And there's an accessibility checker, which can be a really great tool to sort of get you started in thinking about, okay, what types of things should I think about when I'm trying to build more accessible vizzes. At Devs on Stage, and I think also at the keynote, some other cool dynamic formatting was shown. So dynamic formatting includes, it just enables us a little bit greater flexibility in formatting text, incorporating accessible theming, making things a little bit more dynamic. And of course, the week of May the 4th, be with you, we saw dark mode also be a potential option. And if you're wondering what's up with this picture of Flex with the pineapple, at Devs on Stage, go watch the recording on Salesforce Plus. They pass around a pineapple. I don't know where it started. It's been going on for quite a while, over a decade now. And for a brief moment, Flex was so close to the pineapple in the middle of a piano bar the night of Devs on Stage. And so I had to get this shot. Also, other things that we saw highlighted, keyboard navigation for authoring. I think this has been around for a little bit, but it was actually mentioned during one of the main keynotes, which was amazing. Keyboard navigation for authoring means that people can build visualizations without relying on a mouse, which is huge for folks who cannot use a mouse, who do rely on a keyboard, not just to navigate, but to actually build out their Tableau dashboards. So, woohoo! And finally, we talked about the education hands-on training session, but their accessibility had one too. This is the first year. I think they offered it 3 different times. And the even better news is we're working with the folks who hosted that session to bring it to an accessibility tug in or multiple. We'll have to figure out timing, but bring that hands-on training session to everyone via the accessibility tug. So we are super excited about that part. So that's what all of the accessibility or some of the accessibility at TC26. There were a couple of other sessions, including one on the TC roadmap, which is also on TC roadmap for accessibility, which is also on Salesforce Plus. And with that, we're going to roll into sort of the theme behind today's HETUG and Accessibility Tug, Global Accessibility Awareness Day. So this is its 15th year, and it really is a day where if you go to the accessibility.day website, you'll be able to see there are so many events taking place around accessibility, digital accessibility around the globe. So as we think about things like Title II and Section 508 and all of the other accessibility rules and regulations, and the guidelines that we have through the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, we're not, just think about it, we're not the only ones who are thinking about accessibility. There's a whole bunch of people trying to make all the products that are out there, including Tableau dashboards, a lot more accessible to folks who have disabilities or impairments, or just need a different way of sort of accessing digital content. So we're really excited about that sort of being our framing for today. And with that, I am going to introduce our first speaker, who is an expert in this space. So Mark Miller is the founder and principal accessibility strategist at Inclusion Impact Accessibility, and he's here to give us a background on all of the different regulations and guidelines around accessibility. He's worked for small consultancies and large enterprise accessibility firms. He's helped clients with their strategy and sustained conformance to requirements. So looking at things like ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 508, the European Accessibility Act, or EAA, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. We're going to hear quite a bit about WCAG today, but Mark is one of the folks on the Accessible Platforms Architecture Working Group that's part of the W3C group, the same group that the organization behind WCAG, and he's helping build out their accessibility maturity model, which will help organizations sort of think about or understand better where they are in terms of digital accessibility so they can evaluate and then improve from there. Like I said, Mark is an expert in the field, and we're really, really lucky to have him here today to sort of give us a rundown of what Title II and Section 508 and all of those other acronyms I mentioned earlier mean for us as we work through bringing our Tableau dashboards sort of to conformance with WCAG guidelines. So Mark, go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you, Ashley. That was a fantastic introduction. I hope I can live up to the hype. So the first thing I want to say is, like, what a great way to enter a webinar or a talk or whatever. The music was fantastic, and I was thinking the whole time we were doing that, like, I saw the sign. I wanted to show people who can see my camera that the sign for accessibility, I'm holding my hand kind of like I'm patting somebody on the head. And then my other hand kind of slips underneath it. That is the American Sign Language sign for accessibility. So if you saw that sign today, it's probably because it's Global Accessibility Awareness Day tomorrow, which is the next thing I wanted to say. This is a fantastic event to celebrate Global Accessibility Awareness Day. I am so honored to have been invited. Roshni and Ben and I were all kind of united by chance at conference in Austin not long ago. I'm super privileged to have Ben here as well presenting. He is an expert on Tableau. So I'm going to really try to set the stage from an accessibility standpoint. And then I think he's going to take a lot of what I talk about and really apply it to what is specifically important to you all. So I'm honored to be here with him. So having said that, I'm going to grab the screen share and flip over to my slides and we'll get started. As I talk, um, please interrupt me if you have any questions. Don't feel like you have to wait to the end or anything like that. I am absolutely happy to answer questions on the fly. In fact, I sort of prefer it that way because I find it's better to chat about those things when you guys are thinking about those things. Okay, so really, we talked a lot about Title II and all of that. I'm going to go through all of that, but my purpose today really is to frame accessibility within the higher education space. So we've got a lot more than just Title II to talk about. I am going to skip over my bio because you guys just heard probably a better rendition of it than I could do. And we're going to go over what digital accessibility actually is, why it's important. We're going to talk about Title II of the ADA, and we can talk about some of the other regulations as well. We're going to talk about why, aside from all the regulations, that accessibility, what are the advantages to higher ed? A lot of people think about this as compliance, but what are the things that really will be a benefit once you've done it, right? So zooming out and not just thinking about it as compliance, but thinking about it as an advantage to the institution as well. And then we'll talk a little bit for you all who are curious about how people with disabilities use the web, some of the tools that are available to help with this, why manual audits are important, and then we'll get a little bit into that strategy, which is that work that I do with it, B3C. And then we'll tell you some very simple things you can do to get started if you're thinking about Tableau or anything else, some real basic ways that you can think about and start looking at the accessibility of something. Okay, so what is digital accessibility? So digital accessibility is really equal access to digital content and functionality for all users. So we often think about digital accessibility as like, oh, people with disabilities access their computers and content in a different way, and all that's true. But the way that we think about it and the way to think about it if you step back is just equal access for everyone, regardless of their ability. And it applies to things like websites, applications, documents. So think about all those PDFs that are out there, your desktop computer, tablets, phones. These are all different ways that people might be accessing. We call those different portals that people might be accessing that content through. And the one that people sometimes don't think about as much, even if you are familiar with this space, is what we call kiosk or enclosed systems. I kind of wished we would get away from the term kiosk because it makes everybody think of that sort of, when you go to the airport and you get your baggage tag or, some big thing in the middle of a mall or something like that. It's really any enclosed system. So when you have a nice dinner and the wait staff comes along and hands you that thing so that you can pay, you tap your credit card on it, and they go, "Oh, there's a question you have to answer." And of course, the question is, "How much do you want me to give me for a tip?" So you answer that. That is an enclosed system. That's a piece of hardware with dedicated software inside of it. And that's really what we say when we mean kiosks. And it's an important concept, particularly if you think about, a lot of you, I'm assuming, work in higher education. And if you think about campuses, that kind of thing is out there. In fact, my son created one back when he was at the University of New Hampshire, where you could get credit for going to different talks and stuff around campus. And they had tablets that you could log in on so that you got credit for being there. All right, so what is digital accessibility and who are the users? So when we think about it from the standpoint of disability, which is really where we do need to focus because those are the people who have a alternative means of accessing that information, we're really talking about four major categories. So people who are blind, people with hearing impairments, people with mobility impairments. And when you're talking about digital accessibility, it's really oftentimes when your hands are, you can't use your hands in the same way. And then the category which I fall under, which is cognitive learning or neurological disabilities. I have dyslexia, so I fall under this category. I don't need a ton of accommodations from the digital accessibility standpoint, but I do accommodate. So users who are blind, they use things like screen readers that speak the content aloud that f that folks who have vision are probably consuming through a keyboard, mouse, and monitor, right? That person who's blind is going to be using keyboard and screen reader. They may also be zooming. And the really interesting thing about that is that probably the majority of people who are blind, considered to be blind, are using a combination of zooming technology and screen readers. So a lot of people think it's one or the other. It's both. And if you think about those degenerative diseases with the eye, sometimes people start with zooming technology and that's fine, and then eventually they become screen reader only users, and there's a big middle part. People with hearing impairments, and they can obviously they only use the keyboard, and that has particularly a certain place in vision loss, and that obviously you can't point a mouse if you can't see where you're pointing. So that's why keyboard accessibility is so important. Users with hearing impairments, they require a text-based alternative. It's that simple. So transcripts, captions, and then sort of alternatively, or another option is sign language, like I just showed you that sign for accessibility. Digital accessibility would look like that for those of you who can see. Um, and but really, it's about text-based in terms of conforming to the guidelines. People with mobility impairments, they are also keyboard-only users. They may use speech to text, and they probably need more time. I'm going to hold something else up here, so I hope you guys can see. But this book of poetry is called Soul of a Rose by Rosemary um, Muccio, and she is a friend of mine she's essentially a quadriplegic and she can't speak. So she uses her uh, computer with a head wand. So imagine a bandana with a kind of a pencil sticking out of it is the easiest way to think about it. So she's tapping her keyboard with that. So keyboard accessibility is really important for her, and it takes her a long time to do the same sorts of things that we would do on the web. So that more time is important for her. Great book of poetry. That's on my there's a article on that on my website if you guys are more interested. And then users with cognitive learning neurological disabilities. This is a tough category because everybody's very, very different in this category. I have dyslexia. There's people with autism, and all sorts of other cognitive or neurological type disabilities, and the needs vary. But they'll use screen readers. I use a screen reader particularly to proof my own work. Consistent, predictable layout. Sometimes they need simple language, right? And fewer distractions and more time can be important for them as well. So let's get into it. The guidelines, right? And we've already talked about the W3C. This is that group that I work on for the accessibility maturity model. The W3C was created by a gentleman named Tim Berners-Lee. He was working at CERN, where that big particle accelerator is at the time, and he needed a way to create scientific documentation. And that's where HTML markup started, and that's where this internet thing at the time that some people were using turned into a platform for the World Wide Web. World Wide Web is this how most of us use the internet with these interlinked documents. Now, the World Wide Web Consortium also creates the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which guide us in terms of how to make sure that everything that we create is usable by everyone. There's some talk at the W3C right now about people wished that they hadn't used web for the W because it really applies to things more than on the web. So don't let that confuse you. It applies to mobile. It applies to documents. It applies to all sorts of things. So don't let that kind of distract you into thinking it only applies to websites. It absolutely doesn't. So it's there to help make websites, apps, digital content, anything like that accessible. The current iteration of it is 2.2, and it's an additive standard. So 2.2 is 2.1 with more stuff for the most part. There's some things that were deprecated, but those are things that just technology doesn't fit with technology at all anymore, and it wasn't much. So we always recommend people look at the highest standard, even if something like Title II says 2.1. We want you to look at 2.2 because why not? And you might as well start thinking about the future. There's 3 conformance levels, A, AA, and AAA. Market standard is AA. They are kind of like A is the has the least stuff or is the simplest in a way. It's not really the right way to say it. The right way to say it is that A is the bare minimum. So if you were looking for just the absolute bare minimum of something that might be usable by people with disabilities, it would be A. But we don't want to be there. We want to be at double A, which layers on top of that and really creates something usable. Triple A is almost like additional stuff, right? That's like, oh my gosh, we want to be excellent for a person who's blind. What else could we do? You can look at triple A for that. You got to be a little careful because sometimes you can do something for one disability type in triple A, and it actually creates some negative experience for another disability type. So that's why that double A is market standard and it's considered to be achievable. And it's what a lot of folks, a lot of these guidelines we're going to talk about refer to. The WCAG guidelines are built on four principles, and they spell the word poor, and it's perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. I am not going to bore you with the details of which each one of those things mean, but it's kind of interesting. So if you want to jump in and look at the guidelines, there's a nice explanation of what they mean by all those things. But the words are pretty good themselves and should give you kind of a good idea. So when you see, if you ever see the guidelines, like 1 point something, 2 point something, 3 point something, 4 point something, those numbers reference whether it's a perceivable, operable, understandable, or robust, whether it's in those categories. Um, and then underneath all those things that are numbered that I was talking about, the kind of the technical sounding 1.1.1, 1.2.1, all that, those are the success criteria. Those are the criteria that you follow to be, to understand you're being accessible. So why is it important? Well, there's three major categories. One is just the moral category. We all want to include everyone. Um, the next one is that it's good business. It actually, and we'll talk about this from the standpoint of higher education as we go on, but it actually improves your business. It can improve for private businesses. It can improve their ROI. We'll talk about how it may have an effect on student retention within college campuses. But it often gets lost in that regulatory need that you're actually doing something that's beneficial to the organization. And then the last one is that regulatory need that I threw it under kind of this category of legal, but some people are afraid of getting sued. Some people are just trying to meet regulatory requirements and deadlines, but it's that category. So if we look at it from that moral standpoint, business is by people, for people. Why not include all people? And that should kind of be a mic drop, full stop, because that's really what it's all about. Everyone deserves equal access. There's really good data out there on employee morale increasing when they know that their organization is focused on accessibility. And then one of my favorite ways to just kind of blanketly describe all this that we do are that people are not disabled if the environment doesn't disable them. People aren't disabled if the environment doesn't disable them. So if I'm in a wheelchair and I roll up to your student union building and there's only a big set of stairs to get into it, I am disabled because I can't access that building. As soon as the environment changes and there's a ramp I can use, I no longer have a disability. There's no difference between me in a wheelchair and another person in terms of their ability to access. So it's a really cool and important concept. So good business, according to the World Health Organization, and I think that Roshni, I think you actually mentioned this briefly when you were talking. According to the World Health Organization, 16% of the worldwide population have a disability. That is 1.3 billion people. It's about a third of the people. So if you're in a room and you look around, out of every three people in that room, one of them has some sort of a disability, whether or not you can perceive it. Increasing business, it's increasing because the global population is aging. So if you are lucky, you will have a disability. And I know that's a weird way to phrase that, but if you are lucky, you will have a disability because it means that you have lived to a ripe old age and either your eyesight's going to deteriorate physically or you're going to deteriorate and have issues. Hearing is going to get more challenging. If you're lucky, these things are going to happen to you and you are used to using technology today. You're going to want to continue to use technology as you age. The total after-tax disposable income for working age people with disabilities in the US is $490 billion. So you can imagine if you're a business, what you're missing out on financially if you exclude that group of people. In the senior population alone, if we just think about it in terms of people who are aging, they have $8 trillion in disposable income, and they run around, spend it a lot because they're not working like all of us. One of the largest and most underserved segments in the country. So we might think of all sorts of different groups of people, and people with disabilities are kind of the ones thought about the least. People with disabilities and their families and friends are outspoken and powerful advocates. So you're not just talking about when you serve somebody with a disability, you're not just talking about them, you're talking about all the people that care about them. So if you think about that, I don't know if you guys have ever heard that sort of everybody knows 250 people is kind of their circle of influence. It was based on the average number of people that show up at the wedding. That's the way to think about it. Like when you make somebody with a disability happy and you include them, you're actually inviting through your goodwill 250 other people you may not even know about. All right, so let's get into it. The legal part of it, right? The compliance part of this, or the regulatory part of this. The ADA is the U.S. federal government. It was signed into law in the 1990, in 1990 on that day, on that year. And it has different titles, Title II, Title III. Title II is one that you may have heard of a lot lately because Title II had a deadline of April 24th, 2026. If you had a population of more than 50,000 people to be conformant to the WCAG 2.1 guidelines. If you were less than 50,000 people, that date was pushed out to April 26th, 2027. So actually, I should have updated the slide or put it somewhere on the slide. That has been pushed out a year. It's April 26, 2027 now for populations over 500 or more. And it's April 26, 2028 for populations that are less than 50,000 people. Just because that changed doesn't mean you don't have to be accessible today, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Section 508, which we've already mentioned, that is the U.S. federal government. Those are the U.S. federal government guidelines for accessibility. If you build something for the U.S. federal government, that is what tells you you have to be accessible. They point to WCAG 2.0, where Title II is 2.1. Title III doesn't point anywhere. Title III is public-facing stuff. So that library, that bank, anytime you face the public, if your website faces the public, then it's required to be accessible. All of that is fought through case precedent. So the WCAG guide, it's really the same if you were to boil down to what you need to do. But Title II doesn't have a specific WCAG reference in it like 508 and Title II do. But the case precedent points to the WCAG guidelines in a very, very similar way. In Europe, there's the EAA. It falls under this regulation, or it points to this regulation called EN 301-549. There will be a quiz. I expect you to remember that. And EN 301-549 references, anybody want to guess? WCAG 2.1. So you guys see the pattern here. AODA is out of Canada, and that's WCAG 2.2. So let's get into Title II a little bit, because that's the one that's probably impacting you all the most, because higher education tends to fall under Title II. So Title II points to WCAG 2.1 level AA, and it calls out web content, which includes your websites, applications, platforms like your LMS, the course content that is on that LMS, documents, and then media. So media is like social media, videos. I find campuses, we're oftentimes really trying to help campuses get a handle on all the videos they have, because professors just create videos and stick them all over the place, and they're like, we don't even know what we have. And it's not just videos, but that's one where it's always kind of like, how do we even figure out what we have? Mobile applications. And then one of the really important things to understand is that you're responsible for third-party content. So just because you buy something from somebody else doesn't mean you get a pass for its accessibility. This is why purchasing policies and stuff becomes so important. So the deadlines, which we just talked about, I have them here on this slide. They basically would have already passed for 50,000 or more if, and by the way, these changed a week before the deadlines hit. And part of the reason was that they were like, oh, it's undue burden for the business. I'm like, do you know how many businesses like were running around with their hair on fire trying to comply to these things? And then a week into it, they're like, oh, psych, you don't have to do it. So, or you don't have to do it right now. Which is kind of a kick in the gut for people with disabilities. It is an opportunity for the business if they take that opportunity properly. My advice to all of our clients is keep moving. This is an opportunity now to step back, to do it right, to work more on including accessibility within your organization and not just focus on, we've got this stuff out there that's inaccessible. Let's quickly make it accessible. So you can sort of take a breath and you can sort of be more strategic, but you need to keep moving forward. The other thing to understand about Title II is that it already requires you to be accessible. I've done I worked, I was the person that negotiated with the DOJ for the Berkeley EDU consent decree. You guys can look that up. It's public record. And they got in trouble 3 or 4 years ago. The risk is clear and present today. What Title II says is we're going to start looking at it against 2.1, the WCAG 2.1. So you're not out of the woods from that standpoint. And then a lot of state regulations aligned with the original Title II deadlines. So a lot of those are still out there. So depending on the state that you're in, it could be sort of more specifically aligned to the state regulations. Title II has exceptions. The big one is that any content that is archived does not have to be made accessible. So one of the things that we do, if you think of something like Canvas, right, if your school probably has a lot of course material on there that's no longer being used, right? What if it's 2 or 3 years old? Are the professors still using that 2 or 3 year old course material? Probably not. So we see that and we advise around this, and oftentimes as much as 60% of the course material that's sitting out on something like Canvas can be archived, and therefore you don't have to spend your time and money making that specifically accessible. It doesn't mean you're out of risk, because if a professor were to reach in and grab that and use it, you would now be pulling something inaccessible back into the kind of live working system there. But if you have the right policies and the right tools surrounding creating that archive and governing that archive, it can be a great way to sort of whittle the effort down so that you can get to compliance a little bit easier.
Can I just
Um,
add in here? This is
mhm.
another place to think about how you might archive content on your Tableau cloud or server site as well. You can go look at your use stats. Are there dashboards that have been out there for a while that aren't
Mhm.
getting used? If so, maybe instead of having to go in and make all the changes now, maybe you archive that. Make sure that the project name is very clearly archived. Cut down who has permission to restore from the archive. All of those same things that Mark just talked about for Canvas sites, we have some ability to do the same thing with Tableau projects on our cloud and server sites. And that might help you sort of hone in on what actually is
Mhm.
getting used, what is more likely to need the accessibility updates rather than putting a lot of time and effort into just dashboards that have just been hanging out unused for a while. Again, that's not like the silver bullet, but it can help you prioritize and
Mhm.
focus on what really matters, at least in your initial push to move towards Title II compliance.
Compliance. Yeah, absolutely. And there's probably a lot of systems within the college. I know that Canvas, there's actually products out there that'll help you do it. I'm not sure if that exists for Tableau. I've not seen anything, but it's something we could look into. Um, but I think that you said it really well there too. It's not just about archiving that content. It's about restricting who can archive it and make sure that they understand that when it comes out of archive, it now needs to be made accessible. So if you look at the bullet points around it, if it was created before the entity's compliant date or reproduces paper physical media created before then, that's archivable content. If it's retained exclusively for reference, so that's kind of more what we're talking about. Like if it's a dashboard, you're like, I wouldn't use it anymore, but we want to keep it around. Research or record keeping, if it has not been altered or updated since being archived. So if you start to play around with it in archive, it is now you have to make it accessible. And then it has to be stored in a dedicated area clearly defined as archive. Pre-existing and conventional electronic documents, um, content posted by a third party. So if a third party has the ability to post content on something associated with a school, that's really difficult to control. So it's exempt. Individualized password collected conventional electronic documents. So if it's for a person, not a bunch of people, and it's controlled to that person, it's exempt. And then pre-existing social media posts. And a lot of this, like if you're like, I've got a lot of questions about this, it's something that I can help you with, but it's also a place where your counsel needs to be involved, because they need to sort of render a legal interpretation when you start getting into like the nuances and the edge cases of this. All right, so let's forget about compliance for a while, right? And think about if you do become very accessible in your school, like what is it? What are the kind of the cool things, like the benefits that it gives you? And we're going to really look at this from the standpoint of student retention because there's no directly correlative data that refers to student retention. There's a lot of reasons for this. One is it's very difficult to collect data around people with disabilities because HIPAA law kind of can get in the way of it, and a few other laws can get in the way of it, sort of rightfully so, right? Protecting people's privacy. So it can be difficult to understand, but there are some really interesting reports that indicate that there's a strong likelihood that accessibility leads to more student retention. So and these are all linked. So if you do want a copy of this slide deck, I'm happy to share it out and you can go look at these studies. But the Accessible Leads to Achievement National Report, which found that accessibility challenges are systematic and strongly shape the full campus experience. Within that report, it shows that students who experience fewer digital barriers report better overall campus experiences. Positive student experience is one of the strongest predictors of retention. So kind of 2 degrees to Kevin Bacon there, but probably a pretty good indicator that it's a good idea to be accessible. Institutions with stronger accessibility practices score higher on the campus accessibility measure, CAM, and students use these. And students at these institutions report fewer barriers, better engagement, and more productive academic experience. And these are all factors that are linked to persistence. And there's actually a note in the report of the correlation by the people who wrote the report. Students with disabilities report that inaccessible course materials, LMS structures, and campus systems create ongoing barriers that accumulate over time, increasing frustration, reducing academic belonging. And these are two well-documented predictors of withdrawal. So a couple of other reports, this multi-institutional study, students frequently reported that technical issues in their inaccessible digital environments directly impact their learning experience. And in that study, 70% of in-person students and 9% of online students said that problems affected their learning. And these were outdated software, poor connectivity, digital literacy barriers that disproportionately affect students who are already facing retention risks. So again, not directly with disabilities, but not a hard line to draw. And then research on emerging educational technologies. This shows that digital access and usability influence student performance, retention, and ethnic engagement. While not exclusively about accessibility, the findings reinforced that data friction. Whether it was from inaccessible tools, poor design, it undermines that persistence. So I gathered these up for you all because I thought you would, it would just sort of be interesting to you to see that this is not just a regulation, but it's really having an impact on real people, and not just an impact on whether or not they can access something, but an impact on whether they feel that they can be successful, that they belong, and that they can persist. So let's talk a little bit, and I'm gonna boogie through these next slides because we've kind of crossed over a lot of this stuff. But people with disabilities, they use what are called assistive technologies or accommodation. Those are kind of the two things that we're talking about. So screen readers and magnifiers, those are your assistive technologies, and then the accommodations are the things like plain language or captioning or proper color contrast. Um, so your people who are with vision disabilities, they specifically are using the screen reader, screen magnification. And what that requires is alternatives for visual information. So if you've ever heard of somebody saying this image needs alternative text, that's what they're talking about. Structured and robust markup. So that is your H tags, right? I know Ben mentioned that kind of stuff in his talk. So is this a heading? Is this a paragraph? Is this a heading level 1, level 2? So that the semantic structure of that page is easily understood. And that enables a person with a screen reader to quickly scan through the page. Keyboard accessibility we talked about, and then logic behind the navigation. Okay. So automated tools, we often think about automated scanning. Automated scanning only catches 30%, 30 to 40% of the failures to the WCAG guidelines. If you grab an automated scanner that is free, it tends to scan one page at a time. Great. Everybody should have one. And they're great ways to get started. And oftentimes you're working on a single page, and that's the information that you need. Crawlers are usually paid, and they will crawl and give sort of an overall picture of an entire website. They are great for monitoring your accessibility over time and as kind of an early warning system. Because usually it's not one issue that pops in, it's a group of issues, and 30% of them will be detectable by that tool, and you'll note early rather than later that an issue has popped up. And it also creates evidence of your sustaining, improving all of that accessibility with that kind of ongoing progress annotation that can happen through that automation. There's in Canvas specifically, Pope Text, one of my favorite ones. There are things that can help your people creating course content do it in a way that's accessible. It gives them some automation tools. Also, we'll walk them through. Canvas has this built in, but you can really level it up if you go to a third party. But we'll also provide walkthroughs and stuff like that for folks, so they can really get beyond what the automation can do. There's archive tools for Canvas, so we talked about that as well. There's tools out there that will allow you to do surveys in an accessible way. And then there's tools out there that will inventory and make video content accessible. And I have a note here that says AI, nope. AI is not going to improve that 30 to 40%, although there's a lot of people saying they've got an answer. No. And if that wasn't clear, no. I think someday we'll get there. It's kind of a mess right now. So this is the current sort of snake oil. Manual audits are important. This is where somebody with accessibility expertise actually goes in and interacts with whatever it is, website, Tableau, course content, in the way that people with disabilities do. This is really the only way to come as close. And notice I put the word close in there. These are human beings. They make mistakes. There's no such thing as 100%, but as close to 100% conformance with the guidelines as possible. And a good report will show you where you're variant to the guidelines. So show you where you have issues, prioritize those issues, give actionable remediation advice right down to code snippet level. And then there's a couple of ways. ACR stands for Accessibility Conformance Report. There's one called the VPAT, Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. They can be used to demonstrate your level of conformance to the guidelines. And depending on the opinion of your legal counsel, that may be one of the strategies you use to show that you're doing what you're supposed to do against something like Title II. Accessibility strategy. So this is, forget about the thing, right? Forget about Tableau. Forget about the graphs in Tableau, the reports. Forget about Canvas. Forget about all that. What is your organization's ability to make sure its digital content is accessible? And what does the organization need to do to make that more efficient, more sustainable, and less expensive? And that is that work I do with AW3C. So this is referring to those maturity models. So we look at that, we come up with a risk assessment, the gap analysis, we measure you on the model, and then we actually create an actionable roadmap to incrementally over time make improvements. And this is where a lot of higher education is going today, is like, we're doing this because ad hoc, we jumped in and we had to do a bunch of stuff. But now we need to know how to really do this as a proper business practice. Um, if you guys want to mess around, I linked to my free tools page on my website. You can just simply put your mouse aside and try and navigate something with a keyboard. That'll give you a really good indication as to whether it's accessible. Simple things to look for too is, do images have alt text? Remember that heading structure I talked about? Is that there? If you hit your tab key over and over again, does it move logically through the page, or is it jumping around all over the place and confusing everybody? There's tools out there that'll overlay that tabbing order so you can just see it on the page too. Um, and then inventorying assets, so understanding what you have. It's a good place to use automation as well, because you can scan them and be like, oh, this one looks like the worst. And you can use that as one of the metrics you use to decide what you're going to prioritize. What is used the most? What's public facing? These are different ways to think about your assets that might help you understand what to start with. And then, of course, you don't have to do it alone. There's a lot of good accessibility consultants like myself out there. And having somebody that really understands this in the mix to help you, whether it's just Tableau that you're concerned with, or whether you're thinking about the whole college. Most of these folks, particularly the small companies, will come in and meet you where you are. So they'll give you the support you need. They don't come in and say, you need all of this. They should come in and say, what are you doing? What are you doing well? And where can we help? So this is just about me. And if there's any questions, I'll take them. But
Think we are gonna, if you're okay with it, do questions in chat,
sure.
so that Ben has a little bit of time. So I'm gonna pass the mic over to Ginny.
Thank you, Roshni. So I am going to introduce our next speaker, Ben Snider. He is joining us from the University of Illinois. Ben is a business intelligence developer there, and he builds and manages embedded Tableau visualizations for various university initiatives. He has an interest in applying new Tableau features to meet Title II requirements more efficiently. And there are a lot of new Tableau features that are going to help with accessibility, so that's super exciting. Ben is also a member of the Higher Education Data World, or HEDW, and occasionally presents at their annual conference. So Ben is going to share some of what his team has learned about accessibility as the University of Illinois has tackled the Title II compliance effort. So Ben, thank you for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Virginia. Appreciate that. And thank you to Mark. That was a fantastic presentation. Mark I had the privilege of meeting with him on Monday. He does a fantastic job of kind of like, here's the brass tacks of what we're talking about. And I really appreciate that. So thank you very much, Mark, for sharing your insights. And I'm going to try to piggyback on some of that with regards to Tableau now. So kind of shift your thinking in terms of who you're listening to now. Mark is absolutely an expert in accessibility. I am not, and I will never claim to be. I've just kind of I've walked this trail a little bit. And so for those of you that haven't done this yet, I just have a few tips and tricks to share. So I want to frame it. That's not me being, Midwestern modest. I'm just trying to show how that's just the truth of the matter. So some things I'm going to show you, I'm sure some of you will be very familiar with them. Some things you might be like, well, actually, there's a way to improve upon that, or maybe that's not exactly what you're going for. Please let me know. I'm absolutely open to that information. So here we go. Yep. So again, I work for the University of Illinois system, and we have three main campuses, of course, Urbana, Chicago, and Springfield. There's the beautiful Sears Tower. Some of you may have heard that it's called the Willis Tower now. It's actually not true, because I deem it to be the Sears Tower, and it'll be that way until I die. So yeah, my family supports the Sears family millionaires and not the Willis family millionaires. That's a joke. All right, moving on. So a little background here. I work for a group called Administrative Information Technology Services, or AITS. It's a central IT unit for the University of Illinois system. Our three main campuses, I just kind of showed them off there. Our big flagship, Urbana-Champaign, 60,000. When you see University of Illinois in March Madness, oh, we're so close this year. That's the one that you're probably thinking of. Of course, we have a large Chicago campus as well, with 35,000 people. And of course, last but not least, my alma mater in Springfield, with about 4,000 students. And these campuses operate very independently. They're very autonomous. However, we do have a shared IT service, and that is us. But these campuses also have their own IT groups and their own data groups. So yeah, we've got a lot going on, but we also get along really well. We Specifically at AITS, we have some on-premise services, or excuse me, servers that we manage. The biggest one being Banner. So if there's any Banner shops out there, that is what we are currently on-prem. Same with business objects, which I work in a lot. And last but not least, of course, Tableau server. And so this is what I'm going to talk about here today is kind of how we use Tableau. And I appreciate Virginia, my introduction. She said embedded visualizations. I always point that out because we use Tableau almost exclusively by embedding visualizations. I know there's a lot of things you can do in Tableau where you assign permissions and people log in and that's how they consume it. We rarely ever do that. We mostly are exclusively embedding visualizations onto other websites, most of them public. And of course, yeah, like she said, we participate in higher education data world or HEDW. I left a link there in my presentation notes. Feel free to click on it, join. It's a great organization. We just had one of our annual conferences about a month ago. Man, I can't believe it's been that long. Anyway, it worked out. It was really nice. That's where I got to meet Roshni and Mark. So it's a fantastic way to rub elbows with other professionals in the higher education data world. And so, what I want to show off real quick then, I'm going to talk a lot about Tableau Server, and this is kind of one of the reasons why. When I presented, this is a year ago at the HEDW 2025 conference that we had, I asked all the people that came to my session. Now, I pretty much gave this exact same presentation there. And I asked them, how are you hosting your Tableau dashboards? Tableau Cloud, Tableau Server, or not at all? Most people said Tableau Server. So again, this is an extreme sample bias. This is not indicative of all Tableau users. So I'd be curious to know what the actual result is for all universities and colleges using Tableau. However, in our experience, we're finding that a lot of research institutions, a lot of big name schools, large schools, even small schools are using Tableau Server. So that's kind of the angle we're coming from. A little bit of background. I don't want to cover this too much because Mark did a fantastic job on it. But basically, they published a final draft for the Americans with Disabilities Act where we talked about Title II. So this covers basically all public institutions, including higher education institutions. Key requirements, of course, the standards. And I really appreciate that they did WCAG 2.1. They didn't just make up a new set of standards. So Mark did an amazing job of talking about what the WCAG is. So I won't go over that too much. The scope for this, I would say anything digital. We should really make a flow chart that says, is this digital? Yes. Therefore, it's covered by Title II. So unless it's something you're printing off on a piece of paper. I mean, honestly, people have asked me numerous times, do you think this is covered? Do you think we need to update this? And I have yet to say no. So I would say, yes, I believe it is. For a while there, maybe other people encountered this. Some people are thinking, well, it's behind a login screen. It's only for internal employees. And so, but in our opinion, yes, it is absolutely still covered. So login screens do not make a difference. That's kind of talking about the closed loop, maybe a little bit that Mark discussed. Timeline, of course, at the 11th hour, they issued that extension. And man, it was like we were walking around in shock that they did that. But, it's the government. Nothing shocks us anymore. So, yes, our new compliance date is going to be April 26, 2027, because we have a population of 50K or more. And so that's where we're at now. So places that have less than 50K, it's going to be 2028. But again, it's never too early to become compliant. So. All right. So again, I just have a link here for a quick little guide on what WCAG 2.1 AA is, and I like to reference that quite a bit. It compounds with all recommendations from WCAG 2.0 and so on and so forth. Four main guidelines. Content needs to be perceivable. For example, color contrast, you have to actually be able to see it. It needs to be operable. For example, keyboard navigation. It needs to be understandable. That's a big one. That's a very broad one. But that's what we believe to include logical order and logical tab order. I'm going to talk about that quite a bit. And then the most recent guideline they added, it has to be robust. Basically means it has to be adaptable with new technologies, has to be forward thinking. It needs to be updated. So those are the main guidelines. I'm going to try to touch upon some of those here. So what was our response then? AITS, I just like to tell people, we assigned a full-time employee with overseeing Title II efforts within our department. So we had an inventory. They took an inventory of all the apps, websites, systems, etc., that they believe were affected by Title II, which again was basically if it's on a computer, then yes, it's affected. And we are administrators of it. And then they had regular meetings with owners and coordinators and developers, etc., and they had resources available. That's kind of it in a nutshell. One of those things, they had their own Microsoft Teams team that you could go on, you could chat, you could post questions, things like that. And they also, this one was really handy for us. They have a standardized testing process from a quality assurance team, and that's in-house, and that was great. So let's say I've got a new website, it's got an embedded iframe in it. I want to see how it's tested against Title II, and then so there's a form I can fill out, submit the URL for the website, and they're going to get back with expansive feedback on that, and they really poke and prod it and let you know. And that's a pretty manual thing as well. It's not, I believe there are tools that they might run it through, but it's very manual. We have people that go through and manually hit that. So very, very nice resource for us. And of course, for the university system as a whole, other departments outside of our department have their own initiatives and processes. And we've got accessibility groups and web groups, IT groups, so on and so forth. But I'm just talking specifically what we did for our department as a shared IT service. With that being said, one thing we learned quickly is that accessibility is not a binary thing. It's not this thing where you come in, hopefully everyone can see my mouse. When I first started working on this, I always thought, okay, accessibility is, okay, is this thing now accessible? It is great. You've reached your destination. It's completely accessible. You've crossed this threshold and now you're done and you can walk away. So now what I found out that that's actually not the case. Accessibility is more of a continuum where you have something that's less accessible and you're trying to push it along this continuum. Constantly to become more accessible. And again, that's a never-ending thing. It's a never-ending process. It needs to be revisited regularly to make sure, are there vendor updates? Are there technology updates? Are there things that we can do to make things more accessible for this dashboard, this visualization? So that's how we have kind of framed our work with regards to accessibility. And so with that being said, I'd like to show a quick demonstration of kind of when we started this whole process, how did things look? And I want to show an example dashboard that I have here. Now, this is a dashboard that shows off, we made it for an HR group. Now, I have since taken it and I have made all the data synthetic, so these counts don't represent any real employees or real salary ranges or things like that. But basically, this was an excellent dashboard. It was nice and clean and simple. So on the outset, we're like, oh, this should be an easy process. This surely is very accessible. But when you start to look kind of beneath the surface, when you start to engage with it, it was not using new features from Tableau that it could have to its fullest extent. It had numerous opportunities to become more accessible. It's probably the best way I can say it. So yeah, I know I think I have a few of my coworkers in here. So if they're the ones that made this, they did a fantastic job. It's a great dashboard, but we were able to go in and make it a little more accessible. The first thing we found out was, now again, this dashboard was made probably in Tableau version, I want to say 2020 or 2019, somewhere around there. So I'm going to click into it. First thing we tried to test is tab order. So I'm going to tab to it. Now you can see I hit tab once, and now you can see my blue focus order box, and that's great. It's around the title. I'm going to hit it again, and now my focus order jumped down to this table right here, a head count table. I'm going to hit it again. It went backwards to the age range table, and so on and so forth. Hit it one more time. It's going down here to a sex pie graph, and then I'm going up here, and now it took, what was that, like 4 tab hits to get to a drop-down filter, and it wasn't the one that I was hoping to get to, which is this one here for year. So right off the bat, we've got things that need addressed. And then from there, there's small things that we started to notice might need addressed. For example, when we start using a screen reader, and I'll show you the one that we used, you're going to see this here. So when screen reader gets to this, obviously we know this means department code description. So if you're in Banner, you know there's tons of codes, and then there's another field that has a corresponding description. But sometimes the screen reader would be goofy about that and be like dept code desk. It's like, well, what is that? If you didn't know what to look out for, what would that mean? Or org code desk or something like that. So that's another thing we realized might need addressed. Also, specifically, this was on 3 different tabs. So I've got an HR metrics tab 1, tab 2, and then we have a text-only definitions tab. So yeah, HR metrics 2 just had another table. Again, this is nice and clean. I think it works really well. But we start playing with it, it's maybe not working the way we'd want it to. And then you have a definitions tab that goes through all of the banner codes and things like that. So yeah, so this was a good starting point to say, okay, now because we have this dashboard, what can we do with it? So we went back to Tableau, and we started digging around to see what Tableau had done with regards to giving us the tools and resources we need to make dashboards more accessible. And so there's a steady trickle of enhancements since 2021 that we really saw. That's when they picked up steam. with regards to releasing new features. And they were, in my opinion, they were pretty quiet about it. So you really had to pay attention to release notes, and you had to pay attention for. So we have an on-prem server, so we have an administrator that does a really good job of going through release notes and saying, okay, when I upgrade the server, what's it going to affect? And we have a whole testing or an upgrade environment where we can stage and test out the new version before we push it to our other environments. So we were able to test these as they were coming out. The biggest thing in 2021, they let you then control tab order more. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second, but that was a huge update. Then from there, high contrast color palettes, that's great. They had a feature called data stories. That was fantastic. That kind of that lets you have text representation for visualizations, and it would kind of shoot out KPIs. I'll show a little bit of what that meant here in a second. Unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be because I took it out later. They had the ability to customize, or they had auto alt text, so you could go into a visualization, address the alt text that was going to be read by the screen reader per object, and they let you customize it by June 2023. And then the biggest batch after that was, okay, for all the visualization types that we have, it started with tables, can you navigate them with just a keyboard? And we kept a close eye on that because that was the second game changer. So first of all, can we change tab order? That was big for us. Second of all, can you navigate that visualization with only your keyboard? And then so we followed along with that. It started out with tables, then it went to linear types, then it went to all types. So by the end, you could navigate a map, for example. So say you have a county map or city map, you could navigate that with just a keyboard only. Whereas before, I don't believe that you could. At least we didn't know a way to do that. So that was pretty huge. And so that rolled out to server on March 2025. Around the same time, they separated the release schedule for a Tableau Cloud and Tableau Server. And then unfortunately, in this one, I lament, but in March 2025, they retired data stories. So that presented some challenges for us because we really thought that was going to be a great feature that we could use. But luckily, I'm here to report, and I can show you here in a second that we've been able to find a few workarounds to kind of get a little bit of that functionality back. And then finally, a filter and Mark's alternate text. And this past December, you could go in and add that, which is nice. So I'll talk about that here in a second. So, and also they had a steady, and I say somewhat random updates to documentation. So you keep an eye out for it. There'll be some excellent blog posts that they would send out to kind of announce some of these new features, show you how to use them. Those were wonderful. The best two that I found are their best practice guide and their author views guide. So you can see I click on it all the time. So I refer to it a lot. The best practice guide does a great job of addressing WCAG and saying, okay, this is the thing that we're trying to address in WCAG, and this is how you do it in Tableau. It's fantastic. It's somewhat brief. It's actually gotten longer, so I should probably change that. And the second one is a little more expansive. It's the author views guide that they have, and it's excellent as well. So I always like to link those in here. But I will move on. And then, yeah, random blog posts, vendor blog posts, things like that, which we always keep an eye out for. So there, I try. So I'm like, okay, what's AI doing? And I appreciate that Mark kind of touched on AI because it's like that's kind of like the thing that eventually is going to really affect this. So we looked into what is Tableau doing with regards to AI, and there's a whole bunch of things, but I apologize. I'm having a hard time keeping them straight. Looks like they have three main products: Data Stories, Tableau Pulse, and Tableau Agent. And I basically used Gemini. Ironically, I used AI to say, okay, what's Tableau doing with regards to AI? And I tried to make sure that was accurate. But so anyway, that's kind of what this is. But it kind of is confusing. Like I put this on here not to gripe, but just to show enhanced Q&A requires a Salesforce org to be connected to Tableau Cloud. And then there's a whole bunch of terms in there. I'm like, oh man, like I use Tableau Server. So all these things are just, yeah, I wasn't quite sure how it all works. But it's good to know that, they're on that cutting edge. But in my opinion, I'm assuming data stories was removed kind of around the same time their AI features really started ramping up. So maybe those things are related. But at the end of the day, if I had to guess, I would say they're still trying to answer the question of, okay, if we use AI on a dashboard, let's say, click here to analyze it with AI, who's going to pay for that compute power? And so I think that still needs to be determined and figured out. And there's some things I've read where you can use, if a viewer has a Tableau Plus account, they can go in and maybe your Tableau server can be set up with an API call to a large language model like ChatGPT, and then it'll kind of spit it out, but it requires login. So anyway, all that to say is it looks like it's in flux, and will it affect accessibility? I'd say it remains to be seen. So I think Mark has some pretty good advice there of let's not depend on it right now. Okay. So, because based on all that, we came up with some recommendations that we could share with other Tableau users on campus or all our 3 campuses for things they can do to enhance the accessibility of their dashboards in Tableau. First one, of course, for making things operable. Right off the bat, make your dashboard 100% keyboard navigable with a logical tab order. So go to your dashboard, set your mouse aside and don't touch your tablet or anything with touch. What can you do with just your keyboard to navigate through it? And so that's kind of step one. And then from there, we found out there's 2 ways to set tab order. There's automatically by Tableau. That's the most recent version that kind of had an update for it in 2021 or later. And also you can, I'm sure a lot of people know this, you can go in and dig into the XML file and set tab order that way. And oh boy, we do not recommend that at all. That is a very difficult thing we found to update down the road, especially if you're not the one that went in and made the original changes to it. So yeah, the XML edits, do not recommend that. So our recommendation, of course, use tiled objects when possible. Let Tableau set the tab order. And what is that? Quick note about the tab order too. It is our opinion that the Tableau tab order works left to right, top to bottom. Now, I mentioned that because I've seen a few references in the documentation that actually say the opposite. They say top to bottom, left to right. And I'm being pedantic here. I understand that. But I like to point out it is left to right, top to bottom in our experience, meaning it starts at a top row of pixels. It's going to hit every object that is in that row of pixels from left to right. And then once it hits the end of that row, it's going to drop down to the next row. It's going to look for something new, and it's going to find all new objects in that row, and it's going to work its way that way. And so that's important to note when people are developing dashboards with regards to tab order. So secret tip. Now I kind of talked about the new automatic tab order. So let's say you have a dashboard that's kind of old. It was made back in like maybe 2020, and it kind of jumps around like it did in the example I gave. There's actually a way you can make it update to the new quote unquote version of tab order by using this quick little trick. Go open that, pull that dashboard down, open it up in Tableau Desktop, right click it and hit duplicate. And then now the duplicated one that you've done, that one will automatically use the new tab order. So right off the bat, you can, if you have a dashboard that's exhibiting the jump around issue that I showed off, I'd say this is step one to try to fix that. And then, rename the old one to old, publish the new one. And then that should really get you up to speed with regards to the new tab order. At this point, I think a lot of dashboards have already been updated to use this just by whether it be newer or just by being developed in the last couple of years. But that's a little trick we like to kind of point out to people. And then another recommendation, make it understandable. Make sure your dashboard has a logical tab order. This is the one we recommend. Make sure it starts from your title, then to a description, and I'm going to give some description examples here, and then to your filters, the filters that then will affect the visualizations. And then from there, repeat filters and visualizations as needed. So what we're trying to avoid is we want to avoid you going to a visualization before you get, or excuse me, go to visualization before you get to a filter that controls it. So yeah, title, description, filters, and then vises. That's a good order that we've come up with, and it seems to work well. A secret tip, and again, Mark kind of foreshadowed this, but yes, actually, at this point now, we recommend when you embed dashboards and websites, take your title and your description out of the Tableau dashboard and stick it in the HTML above the iframe in the H1 or H2 heading. That way, it's set up in a way that's more familiar with the screen reader, and that's the way that hopefully it'll be set up with other websites as well. Like that should be the way that CNN or PBS or whatever is setting up their websites, and so the screen reader is going to be more familiar with that. And alternatively, if you must do it, let's say you're not going to use this embedded in a larger website, you can also put the title description in a blank worksheet. That does add some verbosity we've found with regards to screen readers. However, in a pinch, it can be done, and we've seen that recommendation floating around from different groups. So, recommendation 3. How do you make it perceivable? Now, this one I don't want to go, I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly, but after your title, have an introductory text about your dashboard that includes, we recommend, a detailed description, what's being displayed, brief instructions for use, and then optional if you want to have an author, audience, or sources. That also is typically helpful, although they're probably going to infer that from what the website is that they're on, but that's our recommendation here. And I'm going to give you 2 examples. One's short, one's longer, and you're welcome to go through and see it, but This dashboard displays statistics about employees at the university. Please use the drop-down buttons below to filter the statistics by year, month, college, organization, department, job type, classification code. It is navigable by keyboard with the tab key. Press enter to highlight and so on and so forth. And however, there we do mention you can press shift and enter while highlighting the visualization to open a new window with the raw data for that visualization in table format. So, and I can show what that looks like here in a second. Another one we've kind of come up with is what I call the boilerplate. This is the one that's a little more broad. You can use it more expansively. And our group and the higher ups, the people above me, they felt more comfortable actually addressing WCAG compliance specifically. And so you say the filters, visualizations on this website have been created using Tableau, and every effort has been made to ensure WCAG 2.1 compliance. And so we give a little information about how to navigate it. And one tip I like to point out is your screen reader typically will use the term marks instead of like numbers or counts or something like that. We found in testing some people aren't overly familiar with what that term means, so we decided to spell it out here. So your screen reader may refer to data points as marks. So we just kind of give them a heads up to keep an ear out for that. Okay, so from there, I'm gonna get slightly more technical here. Absolutely, we recommend alt text, and I'm sure a lot of you know how to get to the accessibility portion of an object on a Tableau dashboard. I recommend using this little drop down there where you click on an object and go to accessibility. That way you know exactly what it is you're updating the accessibility for. Give a brief but accurate description of the viz. Here's one thing you could do just to make sure something's there. Now, keep in mind also that it's going to automatically try to generate some alt text, which is very helpful, and I appreciate that. But man, that can be very verbose and confusing and complicated. We recommend you go in and clean that up and do something a little more simplified. For example, this viz type displays aggregate by metrics, or this heat map table displays employee headcount by job type. So it doesn't. I wouldn't recommend, you have to overthink that or make it too in depth. So, and then from there, this is just an example of what it will read out from the screen reader. And then, so for example, this is just a readout of what the AWS, and I can show you that here in a second, or excuse me, NVDA, not AWS, NVDA reads out. And so this is the portion that you're able to go in and you have control over changing. Of course, the rest of it is kind of set by default by Tableau, but this is the portion that you can change. From there, this is kind of a slightly new feature. You can do the same thing for filters. And so you can go in and actually make your filters more perceivable. If that's the case, when you're in there, I recommend you also disable most customizations and filters. So when you go into there, because we found that when you tab through it, sometimes the screen reader can get snagged on, or it's just an extra, I wouldn't say get snagged, but it's an extra thing that gets clicked on. So I would say enable show all values if needed. That way you can see that in the drop down, and disable the show all values button. So that's just an example of how when you go through there, do what you can to really minimize the amount of things that are going to take the tab order focus. If you don't need it, try to take it out. All right, now it's time for my data stories tangent. Like I said, Tableau had this awesome feature called data stories, where it would automatically generate this natural language overview of your visualization, and we thought it worked really well with regards to helping people that use screen readers. Here's an example. This is an example that Tableau used to publish. The total average revenue per store is 2.91 billion. And the wonderful thing about data stories is that they were responsive to filters. So you would go change a filter, let's say to a different area or different dropdown. It's going to automatically update the data story, and then that will be read out with screen reader. And we thought that worked very, very well. And so if you can click on it, you can learn more information about it. But unfortunately, when you do that, you're going to find that it has been was retired, unfortunately. So what does that mean then? Whoops, let me go back. I found out a good way to address that then and to kind of replicate that functionality is to use formulas. Specifically, I call this the Miles method. I've never met this person before. I think they are in the meeting right now. But there is a Tableau expert, Miles Comiskey, and I hope I'm pronouncing their name correctly, that I just found this while Googling, and I stumbled across it, and they have an excellent write-up on how to go in and kind of replicate that functionality using formulas. And I highly recommend it. And you can go in there and you can use the power of formulas to kind of replicate that a little bit. And so that way, even though data storage is gone, we're able to still kind of use this. So have that link there in my presentation. To that end, I kind of came up with a slightly different variation of it that I thought worked a little bit better with the HR dashboard I have here. Basically, it's using this function, the lookup function, because when you do a lookup, you're kind of specifying, okay, based on this table, return this element or this cell is how I talk about it. Return the first one. And then so when you do that, you can make one for your number, you can make one for your attribute or string. For example, I'm coming up with number of employees, and I want to also return the max employee race ethnicity. So here's the two formulas, two fields I would make for that and their formulas. And I'm happy to show these off if anyone wants to see. And then once you put them in there, of course, add them as a detail. That's the spot you put a lot of things. And then you have to go in, though, and edit table calculation. This is where it really deviates from the Miles method. And then from there, you're going to get a little bit into the weeds here, but you want to set these specific dimensions to compute on a specific custom sort order of descending. And once you do that, that formula does a really good job, at least that I found, of grabbing the top value, the max value. And not only for the marks of the value of what it is, but also any attribute. And so I can show you how that looks here in a second. And once you put it in there, you're able to add that as a caption now. So instead of having a data story, you're going to have a caption that says, based on the selected filters, the largest cohort is this race ethnicity with this number of employees. And I found that it does work very well. Now, my specific way of doing it here does have a limitation when it comes to adding column totals, and I'll show that here. And if anyone wants to add on it or fix it for me, that'd be awesome. From there, use natural language and tooltips too to simplify complicated visualizations. That would be great. So now Tableau gives you the ability to go in and in the accessibility menu, you can specifically say, okay, do you want to use the tooltip? Do you want the screen reader to read that out? Yes or no? Or should we just have it kind of automatically spit out what it's seen within that table? So this is another great way where you can go in and use natural language. So in a tooltip, so instead of a caption, you can use a tooltip then that says there are a number of employees that have a salary of, and there's the range. So yeah, that's a fantastic feature. I feel like it's recent to the past 2 years or so, and it works very well. I really appreciate that they give you that granularity. And I can show you where that is. And then some other things. So based outside of using a screen reader, make sure you increase the font size and object spacing when possible. So again, Mark did a great job of showing other areas where accessibility is important, and this is one of them. Use colorblind safe palettes when a viz has multiple colors. Tableau now does an awesome job of giving ones by default. Now, I understand that you might be asked to use your school colors or your team colors. So just do what you can there to increase contrast and ratio. Make sure all viz, filter, and legend objects are clearly labeled. That's another big thing we ran into. And I'm going to show off here what that looks like when you hopefully address it. Try to limit the web page to a single scroll bar. That's an important one for us. Make sure it's not so large that you're scrolling both horizontally and vertically. Try to limit it to a single, probably a vertical scroll bar. And here's a secret tip. Of course, not every, I give this presentation. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with this, but some people aren't familiar with it at all. Test your published dashboards with a tool called NVDA. That's just the one we fell on because it seems to be widely used, and the price is exactly right because it's open source and anyone can download it. It works very, very well. It is Windows only, unfortunately. So if you're a Mac user, you're going to have to test with something else. But NVDA, we believe, is a good tool to use. Yeah, try the portable install for easier access. There's some tips on how to use it. It is very wordy. Not happy to show it off, but one thing we use quite a bit is the speech viewer when you're using NVDA. So once you have it launched, go to Tools, Speech Viewer, and it's actually going to show you on like a tiny little text box what it is reading out. And that's great. You can copy and paste it from there into an email, or our QA team does that, saying, okay, here's the readout when I went and tested your dashboard. So fantastic tool. Recommend it. All right. Whew, that was a lot. I'm going to show you a little bit then. So based on what we had, and what I showed off, here's the dashboard that we started with. And here's kind of what it looked like now after we got rid of the meeting controls so I can get to my tabs easier. Thank you. So again, this is all a test website. I'm not a web editor, but what we did then was we took the title, we took it out of the iframe. Here's where the iframe starts, and we put it into the the H1 tag here in the web, or excuse me, on the website. And here's the introductory text below it. And this is just a paragraph tag. That starts it out. And that way everything's, yeah, that way it's going to be presented in a way that's a little more familiar with the screen reader, just like a normal website. And then from there, so it was kind of, it's kind of weird to make a Tableau dashboard that doesn't actually have a title in it, but, after a while you kind of get used to it. From here, then you will see we have all of our filters first. So when you start tabbing through it, I'm happy to report you see the blue focus here is working very well. It's now working in a logical order. Again, we use that new tab order, we use that duplicate feature, and now it's tabbing through as expected, and it hits everything as you would want. And as you tab through it, you're able to change it, and it's going to update the rest of the dashboard. You can see we updated the filter names too. So instead of saying DEPT or DEPT, it now says department. It actually spells it out completely, department. So that's, again, kind of a small change. You might not even recognize it wasn't there, but now the screen reader is going to be able to read department the way we want it to be pronounced, not DEPT or department. And same for here. We don't use imp, we use employee. You can also see we've tried, and I kind of showed how parts you can get there, but we tried to eliminate like the filter options. So you're, again, try to go through that filter and get rid of all the features you don't think people are going to need. And that way it doesn't get snagged on there when you're tabbing through it. Another thing you're going to see, we no longer have multiple tabs. We put all of the data onto one iframe, and then we stuck to one vertical scroll bar. So instead of it just eliminates a few clicks. That way you don't have to go and click on a different tab to get to a different portion. It's all on one. Another thing we did was to look at, okay, is there duplicate data that we don't need a visualization for? So for example, this pie chart, I know pie charts are very controversial, and Roshni gave a fantastic talk at HETW about the kind of the history of visualizations from like the 1930s. It was super fascinating. But anyway, all that to say is pie charts are not very popular, I found, within data professionals. But you'll see this kind of tells you the number of people are female versus male. That's actually already here in the table right next to it. So we just went ahead and took that out altogether because it's considered duplicative. So we got rid of that. And again, this table here that was on a different tab, that is now included here at the bottom. Plenty of space, and then all of our descriptions are going to be there in text. So again, these are very subtle changes. On the back end, of course, it took quite a bit of work, but we all made it. You notice the background is been lightened, it's been brightened, and that way it just adds to the color contrast. We tried to add more spacing in between. Now, is it great? I don't know. And that we tried to help with that. And you can see we've added this description here. So based on the selected filters, the largest cohort is white, age 51 to 60 with 160 employees. If I go in here and select a different year, it's going to go in and update that automatically. And so now again, if there was a year where this was not the right cohort, it would say the cohort is NHPI or Asian or something, and it would update the age range. So it works very, very well. And so again, thanks for the Miles method tip. That was great. One thing that we're kind of debating now is, so for heat maps, I think it does a great job of attracting your eye to the largest value. But we really got to make sure the color contrast is still there, because this text is a little small. So that's something I kind of need to go and revisit, because it renders differently on different devices. But I need to make sure it's a correct size for that type of color contrast. So there, that's how we were able to go in and kind of make those updates and get rid of certain things. Now, we might even get rid of this table because it kind of has duplicate data. For example, this is a banner code, academic professional, 956 people. It's kind of down here too in the grand total. And so maybe we want to get rid of this altogether. And that's one less thing you have to tab to. Maybe we want to add more descriptive text here. Right now, here's an example of if you have more of a natural language tooltip, it's going to read out. There are 90 employees with the job type of civil service exempt. To compare that to how a default tooltip is, which the default ones typically aren't bad. If you just have a complex viz, it can get kind of messy. But yeah, this is the default one where it just spits out the fields you're using and the values. But however, so keep in mind that tooltip is clean because we went in and gave those fields a lot more descriptive names. We gave them more human readable names. Before, instead of saying head count, that field name was like var underscore imp underscore CNT or something like that. So we had to go in and actually change it to head count. So when you do that and you set it up, when you use those fields later, it sets you up for a better chance for a natural language result. So anyway, that's kind of what we came up with for that one example. So going back to the presentation here. So in summary, I'm going to fly through these. Update your on-prem Tableau server if applicable. So if you're doing an on-prem Tableau server, make sure it's up to date because a lot of these features are only in the most recent versions of Tableau. If you're 5 years behind, no shame. Just now is a good time to start working with your admins, or maybe you are one, to go in and make sure to get that updated. Again, 100% make sure you can navigate everything with the keyboard only, and this is the logical order we recommend. Test it with NVDA. That's the tool we recommend. There's numerous other tools you can use, as I'm sure you are all aware. There's built-in ones with Windows and Mac. Those are good too. Use high contrast colors if you can, 4.5 to 1 as a contrast minimum. Here's a tool that I've linked to. I use this one quite a bit. There's tons of tools out there. I lean towards the tools that are web-based. That way you don't have to install anything. People on Macs can use it. But anyway, this does a really good job of, based on colors that you select, if you go in, and this actually has an awesome little eyedropper tool. And so you can change, you can click on anywhere on your screen, and it's going to change the contrast ratio, and it'll tell you in live time what are the results for that. Do you meet WCAG AA or AAA? And it'll say yes or no. And so that's an awesome little tool. So that's a new-ish. I can't remember what Chrome came out with this, but if you're using Chrome on Mac or on Windows, they actually have an eyedropper API. So don't be afraid if you see a website with an eyedropper to click on it and look out because the API will actually let you click on different things. And you can't see it right now, but on my other monitor, I'm actually clicking around a different window. That's not the web browser, and it works very well. So I highly recommend that. I've got it linked in there. Whoops. Increase object spacing and font size where possible. Go ahead and make it nice and big. There's nothing wrong with that. Better bigger than smaller typically, as long as it doesn't make the page way too unyieldy big. Label all vizzes, filters, and legends. Add alt text to worksheets and image objects, absolutely necessary. And add dynamic captions for highlighting KPIs for highs or lows, and if possible, allow cross-tab CSV downloads with human-readable column names, or AKA your field names. So yeah, that's our quick. Again, this is obviously there's way more to it than just that, but we found that it's useful to have like here's your slide you can pass around, print it off, stick it somewhere. Start here. Like this is where you want to start and go from there. And I have some links in here if anyone wants. Of course, the WCAG 2.1 quick reference guide is a fantastic way to get like a shared language for when you're discussing these things. It is long, expansive, but it's an excellent read. And then this is my favorite Tableau documentation. Luckily, I'm happy to report now, and I'm not sure when they did this, but they actually have more of like a Tableau accessibility homepage where they've started to kind of consolidate a lot of their accessibility documentation, and they put it all in one spot here, and it's really nice. Within this, I would say my favorite is probably the best practice guide because it talks about WCAG specifically. So I highly recommend it. Again, perceivable, operable, understandable, things like that. And it's going to show you how to increase your accessibility there. Yeah, right. Not as accessible, more accessible. And they use excellent language. So documentation is really good. And then there's also the author views guide. I'm not certain why there's two separate ones. Maybe one's more supposed to be simplified, one's more for author views, but either way, they're both excellent to review. And then the various tools I discussed, NVDA, link for that. The various online eyedropper tools. These are Chrome only, and an online color contrast tool, which is excellent to use. So yes, holy cow, that was a lot. I really breezed through it. Is there anything anyone wants to see? I want to show real quick then just how the fields were set up with regards to the lookup fields we did, just to show that off real quick, because I think it's such a neat little trick. So let's say I'm looking at my top employees. It's just doing a lookup here, and then a sum number of employees at the level of first. And then after I drag that in to a detail, I'm going to edit table calculation, compute using specific dimension, and I'm going to click on both of my, or any of my fields I'm using, add a custom sort order, number of employees, sum, descending. Yep. And if you look in the background too, when you're editing these things, it'll actually tell you what the ranking is for that table, which is really handy. And I always saw it kind of did something back here, but I never really paid attention to it. But you can actually see then. So let's say I go in here and change it to ascending. Right now, the top result is 164 because it's descending. If I hit ascending, it's going to change that to whatever the smallest number is. I'm not sure where we're in. So keep an eye on that too. That's another tip you can use. I appreciate that they add that in there so you can see in real time what your table calculation edit is doing. You can also, I'm assuming, go into the field itself and use this default table calculation option. And then it kind of, I don't know, that like ties the table calculation to the field and not the mark, if that makes sense. And I think that's right. And that way, every time you drag that in there, you don't have to do that extra mark setup, I think. So that's just another place you can edit it. So one thing to keep an eye out, though, I do admit it gets a little goofy when you add in column totals because it'll think the total column is the largest column, and then so sometimes it'll say that is your top number, and I don't have a good workaround for that yet. So if anyone knows of one, that I would love to hear it. So, all right. With that being said, holy cow, that was a whole bunch.
That was a whole bunch of amazing, is what that was.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you.
I know, you started this with you're not an accessibility expert, but really you are. All of us can be accessibility experts as we, learn more about what's available, what's required, what's necessary, what we should be doing to help make our Tableau dashboards more accessible for those who, need a different way of seeing in quotes something. So Ben, that was amazing. And I just so you know, I was slacking Miles on the side saying, "Hey Miles, you've got a method named for you now." So
Is Miles here in the I see that they showed up?
He was earlier. I think he might have had to. No, he's still here.
Wonderful.
So yeah, so thank you so much. We are a little bit over time. So we are gonna move. I'm gonna steal the screen share and we are gonna close up the meeting, but then open up a breakout room so we can talk a little bit more for those who are able to stick around for a little while longer. But thank you so much. That was amazing. And we do have, we can always use the higher education Tableau Slack. I know Ben, you're a Teams person, but we do have some space there that as folks are kind of digging into their own accessibility journeys, whether it's for Title II compliance or just building better, more usable and more accessible dashboards. We can always use that space to talk about what we're seeing, what's working, what's not working, all of those things. So thank you again so much. I'm going to throw a couple things in the chat real quick. We really want to know what you all thought of today's meeting. There's a link in the chat. Hopefully those are the right links, crossing fingers. We do have it says May, it's really June. We do have not only our June HETUG session scheduled, but also July through December. So if you are interested in presenting at June or in the future, or if you want to be interviewed at June or in the future, please let us know at the present at HETUG link. And don't forget to register for June. We also do not have our next accessibility TUG session scheduled, but we will soon. It's going to be in late June or early July, and I messed up and didn't include the QR code. So hold up, oh no, I want to show the QR code. There we go. We have the QR code now for the accessibility TUG as well. And we want to remind you again, Analytics Day is happening. The deadline to register is on May 28th. The Analytics TUG itself will be on July 11th. And it is virtual and it is free. And you can drop in and out as you please. And then last thing, a bunch of education TUGs. So thanks to the CCC TUG for taking the lead on this. We are going to have the K-12 higher ed and CCC TUGs are hosting Andy Kriebel, who again, did we talk about him earlier? I think we did. He's going to be this featured speaker at Analytics Day, but he's also going to come back and educate us, or I guess school us, on August 11th at another mega TUG coming your way soon. I'm going to pass this over to James, though.
So I'd like to thank our speakers today for being our guests, for presenting such good information. I know Mike has already left, but thank you, Ben. And I also like to thank all of you for attending our May meeting. And as Rashi said earlier, we would like you to fill out our surveys to let us know how we did. And if you haven't already, please join the HETUG Slack workspace and subscribe to the HETUG at the user group site so you'll get notifications of the meetings. And finally, please stay around for our breakout rooms, so you get to chat with other members.